So great to watch the Tampa Bay Rays going up to Pittsburgh and being able to come away with a victory. And let's start from yesterday and work our way back. I mean, Paul Skeens is just as good as advertised. Final pitch of the game yesterday, 102 miles an hour. But the Rays hung in there. And a guy that's been much maligned during his tenure here in Tampa Bay, Aaron Civale, I thought he went toe-to-toe. I mean, he did what he had to do. He gave the Rays a fighting chance. And then Tampa Bay doing what they've been doing kind of the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so, doing the little things to put them in a position to win. They come away with the victory, and now, listen, only a couple of games under 500, and you return home against a Seattle team that's a really good team. But if you want to get back into the hunt, you got to continue the strong play that we've seen over the last 10 to 12 days.
Yeah, hashtag surviving Skeens yesterday. Shout out to Diaz with that first at-bat, getting the ball over the wall and at least giving the Rays something to work with against a guy that you knew was just going to probably light them up for the better part of his outing out there at PNC. But you just got to survive him, get a run or two where you can, how you can, and then hopefully get again to that Pirates bullpen, which, I said heading into the weekend, I was like, between the bullpen and their inconsistent offense, like, this is a series the Rays could take. The Rays aren't good enough this year where I'll ever assume they're going to win a game or a series, but you can start kind of seeing throughout the course of MLB, like, where the Rays can win games, can win series. And I thought up in Pittsburgh, even facing their two better young pitchers, there was an opportunity there with the bullpen and the offense. And I know we're working backwards, but I really do feel like this team has a little bit of momentum. And the phrasing I've been using is a glimmer of hope, Jay Retro, because they've won 3 out of their last 4 series, including, again, up in Pittsburgh on a day where Paul Skeens had his best stuff, it felt like. So I'm not putting the Rays in the postseason. I'm not saying that the warts have all been cleared up. I'm just saying there is a glimmer of hope. You said it yourself. We might be talking football primarily this week if they don't do something.
No, and they did. And we love our guy Gio, right? Rays fan Gio. He calls into the show. He texts him.
I don't know if we love him.
I think I like him the most out of anybody here at DAE and love him. He's like our mascot. He really is.
He's better when it's not college football season.
He annoys. Who does he annoy the most? You or Pat?
I think it's me. Because I think there's been moments where Pat gets along with them a little bit better than I do.
Okay, the reason why I bring him up is that he came on our show on Friday, I think it was, where you weren't here Friday.
I was listening, though. I was driving around. I had some things going on.
He says
during the greatest baseball player stuff, living baseball.
Yeah, well, the reason why I bring him up is because he said that the Rays were going to get shut out by Paul Skeens. And then as the weekend went on, he started morphing that into he was going to throw a shot. He was going to pitch a shutout or throw a no-hitter. The first pitch of the game on Sunday, Yandy goes, yeah. And it was that quick for Rays fan Gio to be wrong. Now, to be fair, Paul didn't give up anything else besides that. But I just thought it was so ironic for a guy that's been famous for, or quote-unquote infamous for his prognostications when he was talking about that Cubs-Indians World Series a couple years ago. He spoke about how Skeens was going to shut out the Rays and it only took one pitch for him to be wrong. But I love what I've been able to see from Tampa Bay from certain players. And one guy I want to talk about is Randy Arozarena. You saw it with the sacrifice fly in that game. And let's go back to Tropicana Field about 2 weeks ago. They're playing the Oakland Athletics. Miller's coming out of the pen, throwing 101, 102 miles an hour, and Randy Arozarena somehow, some ways, to be able to hit a sacrifice fly in that game. So Randy has shown throughout this year, and not a lot of people are talking about this, and of course it's not the all-star Randy Arozarena, but what he's been able to do late in games, in big-time situations where the Rays need to put the ball in play, he's been able to minimize the strikeout and be able to put the Rays in a position to score runs. That's what you want from your players. It's not always going to be great. It's not always going to be a guy's going to go 3 for 4 and 4 for 5. It's what do you do with those productive outs? Are you able to move the baseball? Are you able to move runners? Are you able to pick up those sacrifice flies? And that's what you've been seeing from the Rays now in the last month that you didn't see early on in the season. Early on in the season, we joked about it a lot. Every time it seemed like the Rays came up with the bases loaded, guys would strike out. They're not even putting the ball in play. This Rays team is slowly kind of changed their approach at the plate, and I think that has a lot to do with why they've played much better over the last month.
Yeah, I got to give Randy a lot of love. Again, I had this out there yesterday. Like, since June 11th, his batting average is just below 300. His on-base percentage just above 400. He's played really well. We talked about that even earlier with a guy like Jose Siri. I think what you're seeing in this lineup is an infectious approach. Everything you just said, Jay, but it's something that is in the best way possible, touching a lot of these different batters and making them play that way and bat that way. What's that?
No,
What's that?
John made a Canva for last week or 2 weeks ago where I said that by July 1st, Randy Arozarena would be batting 200 with an on-base percentage, I think, of 315. He's at 190 and 304. Will he get there?
Got to get up there. If he keeps playing the way he has, they will.
It's so hard. At the farther along you get into the season, the harder it is to improve your batting average. It's so much easier to go down than it is to go up. And will it happen?
I think he can get there if he keeps playing the way that he has.
It's the first time in a while that he's not a negative WAR. He's 0.0. So, he's playing kind of average right now. But if he continues to play that well, I think they have a good shot. Here's the other guy that I really have to show a lot of love to. I called his ass out a week ago, and it was Josh Lowe. Mm-hmm. If you want the Rays to be good, if you want the Rays to start that climb back up the standings and be a contender when it comes to the wild card, we have to see the Josh Lowe that everybody keeps saying, this could be a 30-30 guy. This guy could be an all-star. This guy could be an MVP candidate. Okay, fine. Well, he's got to play. They have to play him and keep him in there against tough left-handers. And he's got to perform like we've seen over the last 6 games. 9 for 21, 2 doubles, 3 home runs, 7 RBIs. Zach, he threw a stolen base in there. He's batting .429 over the last week, a .478 on-base percentage, and an OPS of 1.431. That's Babe Ruthian when you're talking about OPS. I know it's tough to extrapolate that over 162 games, but if Josh Lowe can be that guy, then I have a lot more faith in the Tampa Bay Rays turning this thing around because the skills are there. He just has to do it on a consistent basis. But, wow, he's been swinging the bat really well over the last 6 games.
And it's just like we said at the beginning of the year, the stars for this team are going to have to shine with some of the inconsistencies on the roster. And you're seeing that now, whether it's Randy or Josh Lowe, Brandon Lau kind of getting his self in the mix where he can. Isaac Paredes has kind of cooled down a little bit based on where he was to start the year, but that's okay because these other batters are heating up at the right time. And that's just talking about the big guys, including Diaz, obviously, again, with that leadoff homer. But it's not just there. You can strongly say that the Pirates got vetted this weekend.
He's
a guy who continues to get out there, and when he's in the lineup, his stick helps this team. Now, again, we can say whatever we want about Alex Jackson and his defensive prowess. And listen, Rortved's not going to play every day all the time. It's just not plausible. So I get it. You got to work him in there. He went, I believe, Jackson 0 for 4 in yesterday's game, if I remember correctly, a couple strikeouts. So, look, it is what it is when it comes to the catching position, but I do feel drastically better about this lineup and about the catching position specifically when Ben Rortved is the guy behind the plate. I just do.
Rortveded.
Get Rortveded.
37 hits on the year. The Rays had 17 hits on Friday night. 2 home runs from Josh Lowe, 1 from Rortvedt. Every starter had a hit except Richie Palacios, and he at least put the ball in play all 3 times. So for me, it's kind of ironic that the Rays are where they are because we've been having this conversation all year long of who's to blame, what they have to do to turn it around, and this or that, offense, defensive. I still am not thrilled with how the guys are throwing the baseball, but the offense has picked it up. And if the pitching could just progress to the mean just a little bit, I think you can see the Rays have a much improved second half of the year. Just look at the statistics. You're not blown away by anybody. Savale, Littell, Bradley, Pepio, Eflin. Eflin took the loss on Saturday. Nobody's having a Tampa Bay Rays type of start of the first half. We've seen the last couple of years, whether it was the Springs or Rasmussen or those 2 years where we saw from Shane McClanahan where he was starting the freaking All-Star game out there in L.A. at Chavez Ravine. We haven't seen a pitcher like that. Zach, if a couple of these guys in the starting rotation can get hot, that is how you go on a run. That is how you win 8 of 10, 9 of 11, 10 of 13 is when your starting pitchers can put back-to-back starts together where they're throwing 6 or 7 innings and giving up 2 runs or less. And then you put less stress on your bullpen. And you mentioned Isaac Paredes slowing down, and I want to show love to this one guy. One guy that could be an all-star is also Jason Adam. You look at how he's done. He's been arguably the most consistent pitcher all year long. He's 4-1 with a 2.18 ERA, 3 saves, and his whip is under 1, .97. which is incredible for a guy that's really not closing out games. He's been one of the more consistent guys. And if you have that tag team at the end, the Nasty Boys back there, the Jason Adam and Pete Fairbanks, you're shortening games up. Now you only need 6 or 7 innings from your starters. I think Poche's done pretty well this year. You're starting to see what the identity for the Rays are, what their identity is. Unfortunately, it took them 78 games to do so, but we're starting to solidify some things with this team, and that's why they're playing better. And that's another reason why when everybody and their mother was trying to write this team off, let's look forward to 2020, they haven't even found out who they really are yet. And reinforcements are on the way. We were pushing that off to the back burner for a long time, but now we're starting to get closer to July. We're starting getting closer to the trade deadline, and you're starting to see where this team is at. If they can win this series against Seattle, they can win the series against the Washington Nationals, they'll be at 500 or above 500 going into July, and we know what their schedule's looking like. You and I both said, let's look back at July 1st and July 15th. If they're 5 or 6 games over 500 by either one of those dates, okay, now we're cooking. Now we're playing with something because those teams ahead of them, Minnesota, who they just won a series on the road, Kansas City's coming back down to earth. It's plausible. It's plausible that they can get back into the mix.
Yeah, and again, we're not putting them into the postseason. We're just saying the conversation is still worth having. It's not fair to this team to
you can't write them
close
off
the
yet.
casket.
You can't write them off yet.
It's not fair to a team that's, again, finding their stride a little bit right now. It'll be tough to do against a Seattle team that's pretty stacked. And listen, I'm going to treat that series the same way as I did over the road trip where I said if they lose a series, just don't get swept and win the rest of them. That happened. Even the bad outing in Atlanta, they still were able to salvage a game. I kind of feel that way about Seattle. I feel like they have a good shot. Again, I won't consider them to win anything until they do it, but they got a good shot against the Nats on the back end. And you mentioned Kansas City, similar to what just happened in Minnesota. The Royals will come to the Trop 2 series from now, and if you're still kind of in a good place and you handle your business in that series, really the team that you're competing with after that would be Boston. Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but it's certainly something worth looking forward to a little bit because we just did that 3 series ago after the win against the Cubs. I'm just saying the Rays are in a place now where I think we should give them at least a little bit more leash than we have been recently because they've been so bad. Since June 11th, they've been a much better ball club, and maybe not for as much as the hitting or anything else that's going on. And again, we're going to continue. We're so critical of this squad when things aren't going well. It's only fair to give them some flowers when things are. I do want to say, too, shout out to a guy like Ahmed Rosario who took a ball to the face yesterday. I thought the dude was going to be taken to the hospital. Like, I was praying for his life. I'm not going to lie to you. You take a ball like that straight to the dome, and this guy's back in the dugout talking about how tough he is after the fact. I know hockey's not for another couple segments, Jay, but that's hockey player type of stuff. Baseball players, we usually say maybe a little bit softer than hockey players, but Ahmed Rosario, put some skates on the guy. He showed how tough he was this weekend.
Yeah, that means a lot, and I think that may have had something to do with why they came up a little bit short on Saturday. That kind of shock value that it goes to, if you've ever been on a team and somebody gets hurt like that, it's hard to kind of re-rev the engines and get dial back in. Even as these guys, as professional athletes, it takes a little bit of a toll. There's a reality that kind of sets in, and your heart goes out to a guy, especially a guy like Ahmed, who's a well-liked guy, who's played really well this year. You feel for him. You feel for a guy that was looking for a home into spring training, comes here for the Rays, turns down more money somewhere else to come here to play for Tampa Bay. He does so well. He's willing to play multiple positions. He's very well liked within the team, and then that happens to him. So it looks like he's okay. He was on the top step of the dugout cheering on his team. You love to see that. Just think about it, Zach. Their one funky Tuesday night loss to the Minnesota Twins, 7-6, from winning, 5 of their last 6. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean...
Well, even on this road trip where they went 7-5, 3 of those 5 losses were by 1 run.
Exactly. And so did you see the stats yesterday in the game? This is another reason why. Another reason why you can't give up on this team. The Rays have the best record in 1-run games and 2-run games in the big leagues. Like, that doesn't happen for a team that's 2 games under 500. It doesn't. We've seen that in years past. I think it was 2 years ago with Baltimore, right? Baltimore was the best They had the best record with 1-run games. The Rays have the best record in 1-run and 2-run games, which shows you that if the game's close, they are in it. They are in it, and they have a good chance to win.
Which is crazy because their run differential is atrocious.
Yeah, but see, run differential to me is one of the most overblown stats ever.
We'll talk about that because there's a lot of people that are pinning their hat to that and saying that's why the Rays aren't real this year.
No, but the thing is with run differential, which you can't take into account, this is the same thing that when people were talking about the goal differential with the Lightning. There's always a caveat in there. So you're telling me that the goal differential for the entire season matters for the Tampa Bay Lightning, knowing that Andrei Vasilevsky didn't play the first 20 games of the year? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. That's a statistic in the past. There's not a forecasting. That doesn't forecast going forward because the teams are drastically different as the year goes on. So if you lose a bunch of games, listen, you can lose a game by 20. There was a game they lost last year, 20-1? Remember that game?
I think it was Boston.
Okay, and then so fine. You lose that game by 20. Mm-hmm. You win the next 6 by 2 runs. Your run differential is still a -8.
Well, give me that, though. You'd rather have that than win the one game by 20 and lose 5.
Run differential means absolutely nothing to me. Give me what your record is.
A lot of people that are like, that's their red flag of this.
But you know what that is, Zach? That's lazy. It's lazy because what it is you see it on the standings sheet. It's one of the biggest numbers. It's one's green, one's red. Oh, that you have the biggest run differential. That means you're great. No, it doesn't. Look at in any sport. We've seen this. Okay, what sport is it probably bigger than any? College football. Oh, wow, they destroyed that team. Oh, they beat them by 60. Oh, that's great. You beat St. Mary's, Texas A&M, A&E. Like, who cares? Because in a close game, when the situation at hand is all right, you got to make big-time decisions in close games, okay? That's what really is a true hallmark of a real team, of a real playoff team, a real good team. What do you do when the game is close? I don't care what your record is when you lose by 7, you win by 7. If it's a 1-run or a 2-run game, the Rays team has shown, and if it's tight, they're going to come out on top more times than not. Better than any team in the big leagues. So, again, for one of the laziest arguments in all of sports, the run differential, you can punt that to the moon.
Yeah, and I think that's what it comes down to is would you rather have a team that, has a plus 20 run differential but loses a series because they lose the 2-1 loss or 1-run games? It is tough to kind of make that the difference in a team being good or bad. I know we do it in hockey too with, like you said, goal differential. But at the end of the day, I think it matters, but I don't think it tells enough of the story to say, like, this is why a team is good or bad. Because like you mentioned, you could get blown out in some of your losses and then win a bunch of close games. Well, you're going to take that every time if you end up in the green versus the red. The problem for the Rays is overall they've been in the red most of this year. So that's kind of, again, I think what a lot of people are using is the biggest red flag of why they can't turn it around. And I just want to be very clear today. As excited as I am about what the team's done the last couple weeks, again, since June 11th, since they were swept by the O's, and as much as I do believe that we should believe this team could find their way out of the hole that they've been in the first few months, I'm not saying that will happen. I'm not saying that they aren't without some issues that they still have to get cleaned up and figure out. But it's not fair to this team who's been in the postseason for 5 straight years now, who does have talent still, reigning AL batting champ, has a guy like Randy, and has a record of figuring out their pitchers as well, if not better than anybody else in the league. I'm just saying, y'all, just give them a little bit more time before you close the casket on the 2024 season. They've earned at least another week worth of paying attention, in my opinion.
So the Rays are a -62. That's great. Awesome. The Cincinnati Reds are in last place in the NL Central. They're in last place in the NL Central, and they're a +9. They're 5 games under 500. Are they running around doing a parade in Ohio because they have a +9 in run differential? Does that mean that they're better than the Pirates that are only 3 games under 500? No, the Pirates are a better baseball team. Just because you can blow out some teams, at the end of the day, it's if you score more runs than your opponent.
Yeah.
You don't play by aggregate. This isn't soccer. This isn't an accumulation of runs. And if anything, it's about the runs that you want to be able to prevent run scoring. That's the most important thing. The Lightning are good when it's not about how many goals that you score. It's about how many you keep out. So if you want to talk to me about runs allowed as a whole, okay, maybe we'll have a discussion. But when you're talking about run differential and hanging your hat on that being an important statistic, I don't know. I think you're just looking at something on a spreadsheet. You're looking at something on a website, and you're trying to denote whether a team's going to be good or not based on that. Who's had a better year, the Rays or the Blue Jays?
The Rays as of right now.
Well, not because of run differential, Zach, because the Rays are a minus 62 and the Blue Jays are a minus 50.
Yeah.
Come on, man. It's just it's a lazy thing. That's when people just look at statistics and they think they know the game. I'll trust myself with my eyes, and I think you should too.